Continuing with our transformations through the Holocene or even before, let's think about the hunter-gatherers which have still held on to this way of life through the Holocene. That's a pretty long time, more than 12,000 years. It's important to note that early pre-agrarian societies left us with no written records, call it the prehistoric period. It's thus problematic to discern whether the few surviving hunter-gatherer societies are representative or whether they are atypical just because they have lasted the two great transformations. So they have somehow remained secluded with their lifestyles, but have they had indirect exposure anyway to the modern society and hence somehow modified their lifestyle, or is this really something they have maintained for such a long time? However, what we think we know about hunter-gatherer societies can be summarized into a few main ideas. First of all, hunter-gatherer societies are per definition dependent on what can be killed or found and have, as presented in the previous section, little or no means for producing and accumulating wealth. They are also generally characterized as exhibiting egalitarian social relations and communal production and ownership of property, causing Marxists to refer to these societies as being governed by primitive communism. So if you think about it, they are wanderers generally. They are not settling down. They are not growing large in numbers because of that. Plus, they cannot store things for too long. They kill something, they eat it. If in fact they kill something they cannot consume, they often used to invite neighboring tribes to share their bounty, and this is how tributary power would have come about. If there was a chief or a leader who was good at organizing teams to kill big game, then they would consume all they can and then would share the remaining with the other tribes in the neighborhood and get some reputation for sharing and some kind of a tributary power. So they are generally considered communist in that sense. Moreover, hunter-gatherer societies are small, generally dominated by kinship and with a low degree of division of labor. Exchange between individuals in these societies is characterized by reciprocity, so bartering rather than currencies, and emphasis is on informal leadership, personal autonomy, cooperation, generosity, and equality. Considering all these traits, it's difficult to understand why anybody would like to change that in the first place, right? So if you think about these, the Hadza, one of the few remaining hunter-gatherer societies in the world, are protected tribes, and you can see that they are wearing modern equipment, they're carrying bows and arrows, but the clothings seem like they are synthetic fibers and so on. So there is some exposure to modern modern life amenities, but they create some kind of a hunter-gatherer lifestyle. And in fact, cooperation is supposed to have evolved from these things. If somebody innovated, let's say, a better arrow or a better bow, then somebody else can copy the technology and do better than you in hunting. So there was an advantage to simply cooperating rather than going it alone. Whereas in the industrial society, going it alone now is the so-called second Copernican revolution, where or it's the first Copernican revolution, where innovations, inventions, discoveries, etc. gave you a lot of wealth and power. So can you continue to do that, or do you need to cooperate? Now it's a market economy where you innovate something and you sell it, and it's a non-zero sum game. So I innovate, I make money by selling it. People who buy it can use what I invented, let's say, and make money out of it. So things are complicated. Agrarian societies, or agraria as Gellner is so famously named this type of societies, as per definition dependent on what can be planted, are per definition dependent on what can be planted or harvested. They produce and store food and can hold other forms of wealth that are important for producing tools, weapons, symbols, and other artifacts for enhancing quality of life. So once you start storing and you have no switch for how much is enough for the future, like money, nobody seems to know how much is enough for their posterity, their offspring, or how much they can enjoy really there is no switch. We keep on collecting. In sharp contrast to hunter-gatherer societies, agrarian societies are capable of great size and complexity, with large populations and elaborate social stratification and division of labor. So already social hierarchy is there once you move from hunter-gatherers to settle down agrarian societies. You need an accountant, you need a store manager, you need a distributor, you need markets, and so on and so forth. It's been suggested that most agrarian societies require over 90% of the population for agricultural production to support a small elite. In India, this is a debate. People say agriculture doesn't contribute much to the GDP, but it can produce 60% of the employment, and the top 10% who just buy food are basically being served by this huge workforce, right? It has even been questioned if these societies could be called societies in any modern sense, since the vast majority of their population live in laterally insulated communities of agricultural producers, while only a minority live in stratified, horizontally segregated layers of military, administrative, clerical, and sometimes commercial ruling class. So right now there is some farmers protests going on in France, in Germany, in India. So food production can get completely separated and distant from the working people who can live in urban centers or far away from where food production happens, and they think food is coming in grocery stores or supermarkets. So you can create these kind of strata, and this is one example. The social structure of agrarian society: you have laterally insulated communities of agricultural producers. So you have people producing rice in one corner, wheat or mixed crops and vegetables and flowers, produce other grains and so on, and you have here stratified, horizontally segregated layers of military, administrative, clerical, and sometimes commercial ruling class. So they are in the same class, but they are also segregated by geographical distance or whatever else. Industrial society has replaced the agrarian patron-client system with a centralized and hierarchical bureaucracy. Direct coercion is much less common and occurs only in certain exceptional circumstances, and the state has monopolized the legitimate use of violence. There are some arguments that the individual people-on-people violence has actually decreased, and state-level wars have been killing many more people in the 20th century into 21st century than individual violence. This sounds strange, but maybe this is true despite all the violence you hear in terms of murders and so on. Citizens of industrial society are, in other words, relatively seldom obliged to do things by weapons held at their throats. Notable exceptions include internal armed conflict or dissidence, one-sided political violence, organized crime, etc., which, regardless of their horrors, are relatively rare in relation to the total population of industrial society. So wars kill more people. Israel-Hamas conflict is going on. Russia-Ukraine battle goes on. There are still some skirmishes in Syria and so on. Legitimacy derives no longer from notions of divine rule or through religious rituals, at least not in the modern liberal version of industrial society, but instead through ritualized competition, be it a general election, house bidding, or recruitment process. And of course we also have economic competitions, espionage, industrial cyber hacking, and so on and so forth. So ritualized competition in the workplace, where you have to move up the food chain, you have to do better than the next person, maybe hide something from the next person, or be friendlier with the manager, how it works, office politics, and so on and so forth. And even in academia, where I always have worked, the competition is pretty tough, and the ecosystems can be very different. In the US, you can get rewarded for your hard work and accomplishments in the same department. You can have different salaries, but in a country like India, it's a fixed structure at the same grade. Everybody tends to get paid the same amount, other than some additional incentives, named chaired position or some award, etc. So how ritualized competition works depends on many details. Similarly, the second great transformation from agrarian society to industrial society spread as a result of the transformed societies being so technically superior over the others, as staying agrarian meant a grave risk of being subjugated and exploited. This debate still goes on whether farmers are just being exploited, or are they making a stupid choice for themselves? Do they have an option? And so on. It's again more complicated to explain the transformation of the first society from pre-agrarian to agrarian. This unique first transformation resulted from a complex combination of economic, ideological, and political factors, which aligned what Gellner calls the three spheres of human activity: production, coercion, and cognition, in a favorable way. It's important to note that such transformation is not only challenging and changing relationships between countries, but also inevitably causing massive social disruption within the country, sometimes within the state or the province, and so on. Considering how much we think we know about the Neolithic Revolution and what we do know about sorry, I didn't stress it properly. Considering how much we think we know about the Neolithic Revolution and what we do know about the Industrial Revolution, it is more or less obvious that they cannot plausibly be attributed to any purposeful human design. As Gellner puts it, it's just a random evolution that happened. So in each case, the new social order due to be ushered in by history was so radically discontinuous and different from its predecessor, within which its gestation had taken place, that it simply could not be properly anticipated or planned or willed. So then you make ad hoc adjustments, and then hierarchies form and domination happens based on information, knowledge, other powers you have. Those who sowed knew not what they would reap, nor did those who abandoned the plow and sword for trade, production, and innovation. This point in no way applies, of course, to the subsequent diffusion of a new social order, once established and successful in one location. Once the hierarchy is set up, vertical or horizontal isolations are created, then you fit into it because the educational system, skill development, training, expertise development happen, and you fit into these boxes that already got created. On the contrary, once a new and visibly more powerful order is in existence, it can be, and commonly is, consciously and deliberately emulated. Those who emulate may also end up with more than they intended and bargained for, but that is another story. Okay, so let's leave this and come back and read. As I've told repeatedly in the adaptation course, these kind of social science related courses tend to be discursive and lots of words, and it's hard to translate them into lessons without actually reading them. Otherwise I'll be just talking at the camera and making points that don't necessarily convey the text properly. With figures you can do that, but here it's better to just take the text. I'm doing it in pieces. The chapter is long. I've taken key pieces of the most salient text according to my own judgment, so you can go back and read the book. Okay, see you in the next podcast. We're close to wrapping up this chapter anyways, but we'll keep plowing through it. Okay.